My name is Addie, and she's Kaiya, and this is Beaver,
a podcast and TV show about the mental, emotional, physical, and metaphysical health of Oregon.
Today we are talking to our father, our uncle, real Portlanders who have been here for as long as they've been alive.
Yeah, Addison and I like to say that we're native Oregonians, but neither born nor raised.
Yes, our like all white people who say they're natives, we span almost 2 generations here in Oregon. And here with us is our father, Steve Woodside.
And our uncle, Ken Woodside.
Yeah.
I know. And of course, Addison and I are sisters. We'd also say that.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know.
Yeah.
We're curious about what it was like growing up here, and specifically in the neighborhood that you grew up in.
Which, for the record,
Parkrose.
Back then, Parkrose was just outside of city limits, was not actually in the city proper, and now it is.
We grew up just off of 82nd in Alberta for reference point, and yeah, it was a little bit different back then in the 1960s.
Did it have a small town feel? Did it have a city feel? Did it have a
suburban
feel?
Well, I don't know. Now that I've got experience living in so many different places, it feels to me like it was a little rugged 1960s sort of post-World War II living. I mean, every house was about 1,300 square feet. There were no sidewalks. It was all just gravel on the side of the road there. Houses were close together. Neighbors generally kind of knew each other. The people across the street from us were our babysitters. And then we had, I think, a rental house or a house that had a lot of different people kind of occupying that place over the 9 or so years that I lived there.
What did you guys do for fun in the neighborhood with all those fellas?
Trouble.
A little bit of trouble. We'd play regular old games, hide and seek. We'd play army games, split up into 2 teams and
war was
hunt
huge.
each other down.
Oh yeah.
Big war.
Yeah.
With all of our imaginary guns
Right.
and everything. I just remember that I was very fortunate to be tall when I was a child.
Yes, and we will talk about that.
And so all of the boys in our neighborhood were more like Ken and his age, so 3 years old or older. And so I did my best to kind of hang out with them, although I got kind of tagged with the tag-along nickname.
I know what that's like.
I know what that's
But
like.
you hear the memes from people about that period where the kids went out and they got home for dinner and the parents had no idea what they did during the course of the day. I think that was pretty true. I mean, we were outside all of the time and getting into various forms of trouble. I mean, as we got older, we'd go down to the Sumner Elementary School. It doesn't exist anymore. And they had a flagpole rope, and we would climb up on top of the roof of the school and hold on to the rope and then swing around the flagpole.
Do you remember this?
I don't remember going on the roof. There was kind of a wall with a garden in it next to the building. That was maybe a 3 or 4 foot high wall. I remember running along that and swinging around. I don't remember swinging from the roof.
It all seems bigger when you're a kid. I probably used to do it off of the sidewalk.
Off the curb.
I remember one of us did go up on the roof for some reason, and then the police showed up pretty soon after that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Juvenile delinquents.
Yeah. I think we're just chasing frisbees down or balls or something or a football.
I think even in the midst of when we were playing, Cowboys or whatever, I threw a rock at a car and the car immediately stopped. And I mean, you were kind of held to account back then.
Yeah.
Pretty much right on schedule. So they yelled at me a bit, but
Parented by the other people around you.
kind of. I mean, I think with an older couple that lived across the street from us certainly kept an eye on things that we did. So yeah, they held us to account. But there was a lot of things going on that my mom has a different perspective on because of the adults there. She'll say something to the effect, and I'd have to probably sort of paraphrase her, but she would say that, you know, a lot of the parents or the mothers were like on antidepressants.
Oh
which
yeah,
sounds
Not
pretty
dissimilar to
common
now.
during
that was
time.
Yeah.
great.
I think the
Yeah.
Rolling Stones had a song about that.
Yeah.
Mommy's Little Helper.
For the audience, I think it's important to put in the context that your parents, our grandparents, met at the famous Skyliners Club for tall people.
Portland's tallest club.
Still around today.
Yeah.
So we are tall Nepo babies coming in at 5'7".
Addison and I capped out at 5'7". Neither of us grew an inch
Yeah.
taller.
It didn't come all the way down the generations, but
Oh, we didn't have any. There's no living, male
air.
besides my son.
Yeah, Kaiya's son
To
is
see
the
how the genetics would have
new
worked.
heir.
It's
But yeah,
funny though,
you're
because
both
when
very
I
tall.
was just randomly doing some search on Ken Woodside, our father,
Oh.
it
Ken-
pulled up
Ken the first.
it pulled up a quote from him about him being sort of a founding member of the Skyliners Club, although he wasn't necessarily the first to join. I just found it funny that he wrote a little bit of a blurb on their website, and one of the things he specifically said was that he didn't have any interest in tall women. So,
Yes.
and yet he married a woman who was 5'10". So, and I think, I don't know, was he, 6'3", 6'4" when he
Something like
topped
that,
out?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's not even that tall. You guys,
You guys
Well,
were
what's,
really.
what's your height? What's the tallest that you were ever measured at?
I think when I was in high school, they'd give us a physical every year,
Mhm.
I remember, and my height was put down as 6'5", and I went with that for pretty much the rest of my life. I'm 6'5", although I'm pretty sure I'm not that right now. I'm probably like in the 6'3" to 6'4" range too. So
And I think for me, Mom and Dad were so hopeful that I was going to get to 7 foot. The highest, I think they measured me on the door frame, because the door frames are like 6'8", and I was 6'10.25". So I never made it to 7 feet, which is why I'm poor today, because I didn't get to make it into the NBA as a 7-footer.
Yeah.
if only.
that was
When I
it.
had that opportunity.
Yeah, tell us about Parkrose High, because that's really where you sort of came into maybe your hobbies and interests in a bigger way.
Were you already playing the drums by high school?
Yeah, I actually started in the 5th grade when I was
Oh.
10 years old.
At the first house.
Yeah, so that was in the first house in Parkrose. And me and a bunch of my friends played the drums in their little beginners band there. And I was the first one to get promoted into the advanced band, which was actually held at Parkrose High School. So like, I don't know, 2 or 3 days a week, instead of going to class, I would catch a bus with all the high school kids to go to Parkrose High School for
That's awesome.
advanced band before school.
Cool.
And then at Fremont Junior High School, and then on to Parkrose High School, I continued playing the drums. Yeah.
Was it clear to you pretty early on that it was something you had a knack for? I mean, it sounds like it, because
Yeah,
you advanced
yeah.
pretty quickly. Like,
Well, when I went for band tryouts, I wanted to play the trumpet because I wanted to be Louis Armstrong.
of course.
But then when we got to the band day, I couldn't do I couldn't do that noise into a
Instantly
mouthpiece.
disqualified.
So there's my dreams are shattered
Yeah.
right there. But then my mom didn't want me to play a woodwind instrument because I was already going to have to wear braces anyway, and she had a feeling that the reed would, make my overbite worse. And so the conductor kind of did this, and I did. It's okay, you can play the drums.
Wow, and
And that decided your fate.
Yeah, that was it.
Just a couple
Seal.
of claps.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my story is a little easier. They just saw how tall I was and just kind of directed me
Yeah.
to sports.
They were like, basketball.
They're like, the gym is this way.
Well, again, I think because of the benefit of having played with a lot of older kids, it got rough at times.
We toughened you
Oh,
up,
yeah,
huh?
for sure. Yeah, I got plenty of bruises. I got a big old knot on my head from one of Ken's friends from across the street. So probably got
So that
concussion,
explains
concussion
it.
protocol.
That does explain a lot, actually. Early life head injuries.
Exactly. Plenty of those.
Well, before you guys got here, Uncle Ken and I were chatting, and we kind of touched on this subject, but part of where we want to lean this conversation towards is things from your childhood or early adulthood that affected your, or like that were like political events that stood out to you. So probably more like around high school or as you're entering into that age where you can vote, or maybe you're becoming more like civically engaged. What things were going on around that time that impacted you?
Our class president my junior year, his bandmate in the famous punk band, the Responsible Pedestrians, was big in like mock elections. So he's a punk rocker, and he was advocating for George H.W. Bush, which I found kind of funny. He was anti-Reagan, but he was still pro the CIA guy. But in high school, I didn't really have too much interest in politics, although I was in high school when Reagan got shot. And so that, nobody freaked out. Nobody was told, you could go home from school, and nobody celebrated. But it was kind of widely recognized, hey, the president was just shot, and we don't know the seriousness of it all, but it kind of broke over the next couple of days. So yeah, it was something to be aware of, but I didn't really think too much about politics back then. I was sort of singularly focused.
Yeah. And girls.
I wish. I played basketball to get the girls, not the other way around. So.
Yeah, so I graduated in high school in '79, and up to that point I had listened to pretty much the same music all my peers did, arena rock and heavy metal and stuff. And after high school, just that summer, I started getting interested in wider varieties of music. Punk and new wave were just starting and just kind of being publicized. And I went out and bought a bunch of those records. I got Devo's first album and the B-52s and a few other records, and I started getting into sort of the alternative from like the mainstream. And as Steve mentioned, I met one of the student body president.
Yeah, he was the student body president. Was a punk rocker.
Yeah, so he wanted to be in a band, and we started this band. And so getting around to politics, 1980 was like the first year that I was old enough to vote. And so, Jimmy Carter just passed away. So that was my first presidential vote, was for Carter, because I just could not stand Reagan. He was just this condescending, kind of fake folksy grandfather guy, and I just didn't believe a word he said, couldn't stand him. And so living the first kind of 8 years of my adulthood under Reagan, maybe that's what kind of radicalized me. I don't know. I became very anti-establishment, and I just wanted to live in this alternative universe of alternative music and art, and just kind of get away from all this. You see these documentaries about the 80s now, and everything is going on, and I wanted nothing to do with any of that stuff. And so that was kind of the beginning of my political trajectory, I guess.
And then you studied political science?
I did. When I went back to college in my late 20s, I had enough perspective then to kind of major in something that interested me. I dropped out of college when I was about 21, kind of nowhere near a degree. I'd changed my major a couple times. And I figured if I was going back to school, I was going to finish it. So I wanted to major in something that I was interested in. So I did get my degree in political science at Portland State. And I was working full-time and going to school part-time. Thank you, Providence, Portland, for paying for all that. Even though it had nothing to do with my job, they paid my tuition, which was great. But yeah, it was just always something that was interesting to me. And even though I didn't go on to do anything with it as a career or anything, I did get that degree, and something that I wanted to know about.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I think that's way more, I don't know, that's more interesting than just going to school and doing things you're not interested in to get a job.
Right.
That you're gonna just be stuck doing for the rest of your life.
Yeah, a couple of dropouts over the
dropout corner.
The table is perfectly aligned.
Well, hey, you eventually finish. I
can still.
I could still finish.
You could still.
It's never too late.
It's never too late. New Hampshire, whatever. Online.
Phoenix.
Yeah.
Ken, since your paths sort of diverged, my dad started working for Nike, and that took us over to Asia. but Ken, you got to stay in Portland and really see the changes of the city. And so what was it like to, especially like I would say the internet revolution and like the 90s particularly was a big time for change. What was it like?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like a lot of things, I didn't think a lot about it at the time, but I can kind of look back and see how things changed. So yeah, my first apartment was on Northwest Lovejoy between 21st and 22nd. And the apartment building is not there anymore because Good Sam bought it and they ran it for a while and then they tore it down. But so one of my bands that I played in, we practiced in Northwest Portland in a warehouse district on Northwest Gleason. And that whole area, of course, is now the Pearl District. But back then, it was just all warehouses and we would go there at night and everything would be deserted. We could get into this warehouse and take the freight elevator up to like on the second or third floor and do our band practice. And it felt all kind of cool and kind of noir, in this warehouse district in gritty Portland.
Yeah.
And now it's, of course, it's all completely different. And then, so I lived in Northwest for like a year and a half or so. And it was kind of gentrifying at that time. Kind of dive bars were closing down and what were then called yuppie places were coming in. And I always remember one time I was outside my building dressed in kind of my usual secondhand clothes, from vintage shops and secondhand shops. And I'm in the building I live in where I pay rent and I'm throwing some garbage in the dumpster. And these young dudes in some Beamer drive by, get a job! It's like, I have a job.
Yeah.
This is where I live, so I'm throwing garbage into my dumpster. Get a job! And so from there, I moved into Southeast Portland. So I lived in what is now like the Hawthorne-Belmont area, between Hawthorne and Belmont. And I think my rent there was even cheaper. It was like $160 a month. And so then now, of course, that whole area is a lot more popular. And I'm not going to say it's gentrified exactly because it's still pretty nitty gritty. But yeah, just seeing how the town has changed over the years, it's been pretty amazing. While Steve and you guys were traveling all over the world and living in different parts of the world, I'm kind of a person, my personality is take the path of least resistance. And so the least resistance is just staying right here. And I've got to travel around the world a little bit, but I've always called Portland home, and I've just seen all the evolution. It's been quite something.
Yeah. Are there parts of it that you miss besides the rent, that like the culture of the city, as far as just like how the people felt and the community felt?
Yeah, I guess so. There's a lot of the clubs where I used to go to hear music and play are gone, like the Satyricon, and I used to go way back, like the Urban Noise Club, which is just right down the street here on MLK, and Clockwork Joe's and all these great places downtown are all gone. Kind of miss that.
Gone?
Yeah. Yep. And so all these places are gone. Another thing, I have always been like a big member of the Timbers Army.
Yeah.
And so as soon as the team came back in 2001, from day one, I started going to the games. And it was kind of this grassroots thing, the Timbers Army just kind of formed. And now, of course, they're in MLS, and going to the games is like this big production. So it's great and all. I do kind of miss those olden days where it was just, I used to just walk up to the ticket office the day of the game, buy my ticket, and go in and watch the game. And so, in some cases, it's great to be kind of more of a big time thing. And this goes to as far as Portland in general too. It's great to be kind of in the big time, and they're writing articles about Portland in the New York Times and all this stuff. But I do kind of miss the days when it was a little bit quieter and a little more simple, a little more gritty. But yeah, it's been quite an evolution to watch.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we missed out on getting to experience. Addison and I both love Portland and love living here now, but we definitely missed out on some of, I don't even know if you would call them, the glory days. Who knows? Glory days are subjective, I guess.
Yep.
But there are certain aspects that are like easy to look back on or look at because we weren't even there. To back in the time
That
where you
sounds
could
cool.
actually go and get thrifted clothes
Yeah.
that weren't at a different store that
Mm.
someone has like gone through and curated
Yeah.
and then upcharged
Right.
at their like fancy thrift
Yeah.
store. And now it's like you can't even, it's like you're priced out of that whole experience even, or like going to shows or going to soccer games or even like Blazers games. Like a lot of that, most people are kind of priced out of that at this point.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk about the demographics, but in Parkrose, and I don't know what it was like for you, but I suspect I kind of know. I mean, we had in my class, I think, 2 black kids, and one of them was a big Leonard Skinner fan. So, I mean, it was, I think it was completely different. I think a lot of Portland has just changed. I mean, the areas that used to be sort of traditionally African American have become gentrified and now are really expensive houses owned by white people. And more people now of color are moving out to the east. And so, it's neither good nor bad. It's just sort of the way that I think the city has developed over the years. And I think there's a lot of things that probably negatively came out of that, particularly I think just the fact that all these historic houses now and everything are owned by people that really have no appreciation for the history of Portland.
Californians.
And, I think you've got a lot of people who've moved to the east that really don't have an appreciation about, how great Parkrose and other, schools like that were, because I went out and I spoke to kids in Parkrose in 2017 and they really had no recollection of the fact that people used to fear us when we came to their school to play them in basketball.
And not just because you brought knives.
But we did bring that too.
Yeah.
What do you love about Portland to this
Rain.
day?
I love the rain.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it for me is just, it's home and just familiarity. I'm comfortable here. I know every part of town. It's just completely the familiarity to it, I'd say.
Yeah.
I work downtown. I have for almost the last 10 years now, about 8 years. I work downtown, which is kind of a dream for me, just because I love downtown. I like the urban setting, and I bike to work every day, and I'm out there in the rain and the freezing and the wind and the heat and all that, and I get to experience it. And it's it's just home to me. So.
Do you own an umbrella?
I do own an umbrella. You see, I know there's this thing where Portlanders don't use umbrella, but
I don't know.
I'm as
an
Portland
umbrella.
as it
Do you
gets,
own
and I got an
umbrella?
umbrella. I use it once in a while.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we have one.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing as like we have a fire extinguisher.
Don't use it
In
often.
case of an
In
emergency.
case of an emergency, you
Yeah.
might need an umbrella.
I refuse to have these rules imposed on me.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing more Portland than that.
anti-establishment.
Yeah,
That's good.
exactly.
I'm not taking any purity tests.
Yeah.
I mean, you already like have your bona fides by being someone who bikes and works downtown. Like,
There you go.
Not a lot of people can say that
Yeah.
anymore.
And biking is such a fun, like an interesting way for you to have that familiarity with the city, because I feel like it's so much more intimate than driving, because you're really part of what is happening around you, because your life is in the
Yeah.
hands of the cars and things. And and also just being really observant of everything, and so you notice when things change or new buildings are coming up or going down or whatever the case may be. So I think that's an interesting way that you've viewed the city over the years too.
I mean, just even on my route that I take the Burnside Bridge to get downtown and back, and just the changes to the traffic infrastructure over the
Yeah.
last few years. They've added bus-only lanes and kind of beefed up slightly protection of the bike lanes, with the little plastic wands. But all the changes in the infrastructure to make traveling for different modes more comfortable, which has been very welcome.
Yeah.
We didn't get into this, but I think what's interesting from Ken's perspective is, he saw this he lived through the change, And I kept coming back, and it was like a snapshot, like, oh my gosh, that's there, and this has changed, and that's gone. And so it's a little more jarring for me, because every time we would come back, I feel like I was in a new moment in Portland's history.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the biggest change was when I was in college and they built 205. And then after that, there really hasn't been much change outside of sort of like the addition of Max lines and things. But the city itself is just, you know, great new restaurants. I mean, we were not really a foodie town, and now suddenly we just got all these amazing restaurants. The diversity has really changed within Portland. It used to be pretty homogenous. You know, I think it was, as people have known about Portland, a fairly white city. But it's much more diverse now, and I think that's brought kind of a rich sort of tapestry to the city that we didn't have back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, every time we would come back, it was just like, you know, kind of took us a while to sort of resettle, like, okay, these things are happening now. I mean, when we built our house in Northwest Portland, it was just land and
trees.
Yeah, for good or bad. And so we built there, and now when you go back, you see nothing but houses there, and it's kind of overwhelming how what used to be like Forest Park is now lots of big houses up there.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, and I don't want to get too personal if you guys don't want to, but I would love to, because I want to dive in so deep. But it's interesting to me how you were on this path of like anti-establishment. You're doing your music, you're doing your part-time job, you're maybe not super, into a lot of institutions, if I may be so bold to say that. And then you have your brother who got married at like 22, which is one of the biggest institutions that we have, marriage. And then he goes to work for this like major company. I mean, I know Nike is not, it wasn't as big back then than it is now, but still it was pretty major. And then also for him, like becoming a Christian too, which is another huge institution. Like, what was your perspective on that, for just like watching your brother's life unfold versus like maybe how you were doing things?
Yeah. I guess in some ways I have to disagree a little bit.
Okay.
Because I started working at Providence Portland Medical Center when I was 17, and I worked there for 37 years.
Yeah.
So it's a big institution.
Okay.
And I stuck around for a long time. And also I did go through a period where I was a Christian as well. We haven't really talked about this part, but we grew up going to Rose City Park Methodist Church. I think it was most Sundays, at least until I got into high school and kind of started to push against it. But we grew up Methodist, and like a lot of folks, I don't think we really thought about it too much the rest of the week. We weren't constantly reading the Bible or anything like that. But our father's mother, our grandmother, she was like originally a Catholic, grew up in Cuba, and she lived here in the United States back then. But she became a born-again Christian, and she would send us material. The Jack Chick comic books and things like that, and different sort of proselytizing type material, I guess. And in my early 20s, at some point, I forget exactly what was the tipping point. I don't know, maybe I was doing a lot of psychedelic drugs or something. And I decided to look into it. I'd grown up going to church, and I had my grandmother saying this other thing. And so I started reading the Bible quite a bit. And not in any sort of organized religion sort of way, but I did kind of have that born again moment where I felt like I was really, okay, I'm saved, I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus and all this. And but I that lasted a few years. I did kind of grow away from it. I'm sure there's a Bible parable about that, a mustard seed or something like that.
Prodigal son.
Yeah.
Come
And and so I did kind of turn away from it eventually. I became more agnostic as time went on. But even when I was feeling very spiritual, I didn't consider myself religious, more spiritual. And I didn't go to any church. I tried a few, and I just never felt that welcome there. I went to this one Foursquare church that felt like one of those big mega churches.
Yeah.
You know, I hate those things. They just seem like big money-making schemes.
Mhm.
But so I met some friends who kind of were like-minded, and we sort of fellowshipped together, as we would
Mhm.
say. But I think we all kind of grew away from it eventually.
I do think, though, if you want to look at anti-establishment, you know, I broke out of.
You're actually the
This guy.
anti-establishment.
But my
Defend
mom and
himself.
my dad lived in two places.
Yeah.
You know, and were rooted here in Portland. Ken was rooted here in Portland,
And we were uprooted
Well, and-
across the globe.
I just think it was in my nature being competitive to try to achieve the highest level I could at the company I was with, and that led me to having to take jobs overseas, and that sort of accelerated my career path, and it did a lot of things positively for us financially. But yeah, I mean, it does sort of make you feel like you're a military kid if you have to go to a lot of different schools. We never had that. You know, we went to the same school, and we basically went from kindergarten through 12th grade with the same peer group. So yeah, there's some problems I'm sure that you guys got to experience because of that. And probably some really positive things that came out of the opportunity to be overseas and to learn these things about the world and take these amazing vacations to places that people can only imagine here. But yeah, I mean, even though Ken and I look a lot alike, and you know, we have a lot of the same, I think, mannerisms and things, we're just different. And I was just really incredibly, I'd say, focused on making something happen, and very competitive in that way. And thankfully that translates well in the business world. And I think the fact that I played sports, that I was willing to take risks and go to places. I mean, I traveled to 45 or 50 countries, most of them very hardship countries. Some places we had to have armed guards take us out to factories and things like that. So I was willing to take those risks from me personally, not for you guys, but I was willing to go to these hardship countries where, you know, things could go south for an American. And in many ways, I kind of liked that adventure. I never wanted to just sort of live an ordinary or average life. And so I feel like I always accepted the challenge. But what roots me in Portland is I work for two iconic kind of Portland companies, Nike and Columbia Sportswear. And, you know, Phil Knight and Tim Boyle, I mean, those families are pretty deeply rooted in the Portland and Oregon story.
Yeah, and for people listening, I mean, we always came back to Oregon. We never lived anywhere else in the States.
That's what our Portland bona fides are. Even though we
Yeah.
weren't always here, we're still Portland. We're still 503.
Yeah, we came back.
We never 971.
971s.
Yeah,
No.
971.
Ridiculous.
Death before 971.
Exactly. If I'm gonna get a tattoo, it's gonna be a big 503 on the side of my arm.
No one would be able to place 971.
Yeah.
It's like, what's that? New Hampshire?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing from your experience, because obviously with our dad, we know more about
Mhm.
what his story was, and we don't necessarily know as much about your story, which is our own fault for not asking. But yeah, I think it's just the different sides of
Yeah,
it
the
are just
dichotomy. Yeah.
just are inherently interesting to me and to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking back, I kind of think I had sort of a freakishly stable growing up period. I went to one grade school, one junior high school, one high school.
Yeah.
I went to community college and then Portland State.
Mhm.
Lived in one house from the time I was born till I was through 6th grade, and then another house until I graduated from high school and moved out on my own.
Mhm.
Yeah, we didn't do a lot of moving around and didn't have to adjust, didn't have to make new friends,
Mhm.
which I guess is kind of could be beneficial to be forced to socialize and meet new people, which I never had to do. maybe that's why I'm terrible at making new friends now.
It's hard no matter what.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because if we're just thinking like generationally, you know, we have your stories of growing up like that, because obviously it was similar for you until you moved over, so you know, started traveling for basketball and work and stuff. And then we have Addison and I, who, you know, born in other countries, moved around constantly. Even within Oregon, I went to 4 different elementary schools. And so now that I have kids of my own, it's very much going back to that stability.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I want them to experience things. And if they want to leave Oregon, obviously that's fine. But there is kind of that draw to that sort of, I want them to stay in the same house, grow up with the same friends in school. And but how do I like inject some of that adventure and like wanting to live not dangerously but, you know, live adventurously,
Yeah.
Right.
and have that kind of global mindset while still having some like very firm roots, because I know developmentally that's hard. It was hard, you know, moving around a lot, and so yeah, giving them kind of that foundation while still inspiring them. And I think maybe that's something nice about Portland. And you kind of touched on that about how it's changed and has been more diverse and different food scenes and different, you know, people moving here, different cultures. You know, I think maybe they will grow up, you know, with a more global mindset, just because the city itself has become more maybe like international, or and so maybe that can like open their thinking to other places and countries and cuisines, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But
I think it's also funny because we had the experience of living all over the world, and separately, you and I both still chose Portland at the end of the day. All right, well, I think we're close to the end.
Well,
Do
we
you
have
any
our ending question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have some just really quick 3 little
those are the fun ones.
rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Should I do the last one first and then you do rapid?
Yeah.
Okay, so ours is our last one is what, and this can be as like a personal thing or just as like maybe your generation, or I don't know. You can take creative liberties with this. What would you like your legacy to be as far as leaving Oregon how you found it, sort of thing? Like, not leaving it how you found it, maybe leaving it different than how you found it. I'm not saying you guys are going to die tomorrow, but I'm just saying, like...
You never know.
It could happen. Ken's biking to work one day and gets sideswiped or something.
Oh my gosh, let's not talk about
Sorry, I didn't mean to make it dark.
If you don't talk about it, then it could happen.
Yeah.
Wait, that's the opposite.
Yeah, we're not going to jinx it. But, I mean, even if, obviously, you're alive and well. But, yeah, what would you like your legacy, or your generation's legacy, or people that, you know, were born and raised here in your time, what would you like your legacy in Oregon to be?
Well, we were both born in the early 60s, kind of the end of the baby boom. So I guess as far as technically we're baby boomers, although I think we probably feel a certain more affinity towards a lot of Generation X type stuff. You know, I was a kid during Woodstock. I don't remember any of that stuff. So a lot of stuff that is kind of heaped on the baby boomers, I kind of feel like, hey, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know? I'm innocent here.
Don't take credit for any of that.
So, yeah, I think a lot of people in our generation have kind of seen some of the problems that have come up as a result of the baby boomer way of life, where everything was very car centric and suburban oriented. You know, the white flight, everyone go move out in the suburbs and drive everywhere. And I'm not like some hardcore cyclist. I'm a guy who bikes to work, but it has come up a lot. I do follow a lot of those kind of social media accounts that deal with transportation and urban transportation, and just the quality of life of living in Portland. There's just too many cars and too many people driving everywhere. And not that I don't drive anywhere, but trying to move away from that sort of outlook on life. I know and people are starting to move more into cities, and I think suburban lifestyle is starting to kind of maybe not be as appealing. And I would like to hope that we're kind of moving things in that direction, and I know a lot of that is coming from people younger than us, but I consider myself sort of a part of that in maybe a less idealistic way, but just something I support.
Yeah.
I hope that our generation has not destroyed things too bad. I know we're getting to this kind of tipping point. I feel like between climate change and just the proliferation of plastic everywhere, we're kind of at this tipping point where I don't know what our long-term prospects are as a human race on this planet. And I hope we're going to help turn it around and make this place livable again.
Amen.
So I'll draw off that because I've been spending a lot of time in the book of Ecclesiastes for some reason. I feel like I've been drawn to sort of the cynicism of the writer there, whether it was Solomon or some other person that was pretending to be Solomon-like. And I feel like when I get to sort of the root of what my legacy should be, ultimately the things that I see that are permanent, that'll actually have some sort of eternal implication, are you two and the kids that you may or may not produce in the future. I feel like we want to invest in you, and we want to invest in the grandkids, because at the end of the day, the stuff at Nike is worthless. The stuff at Columbia Sportswear is worthless. I mean, in a broader perspective, thousands of years from now, no one's going to remember any of that. But we remember the lineage of the people that have come from us. And to me, that's the most important thing. And that would be what I would want my legacy to be, is you guys and the kids that come from your relationships. And I think one of the interesting things that sort of dawned on me, we were watching, these, like everybody else in the world, the Taylor Sheraton movies, 1923 or whatever, and Yellowstone and all that. But you look at the sort of the travel that people had to make to get here, the absurdity of my dad coming from Cuba to Buffalo to California to Portland, where he met my mom, who was in like Horton, Kansas, to Atchison, Kansas, who made her way to Portland and found each other. All of these things just in a way are sort of somewhat miraculous. The way you guys met your spouses, the way Mary Ann, my wife, and I met, all of these things just seem like, wow, when you look at it, it happened, so it doesn't seem that amazing, but it's pretty supernatural the way these things happen. So consequently, I kind of think of what having children then does, and sort of the element of supernatural that comes with that. And I think that's kind of a legacy moment for me.
Plus, I got all my Shorty and the Mustangs music out there.
Yeah, listen to Shorty and the Mustangs. This is a plug.
That'll last forever. But I mean,
Portland band.
Nike, not so much.
Yeah.
Okay, that perfectly leads us into our rapid fire questions. 3 rapid fire questions.
Oh boy.
Okay, who's going to answer first?
Eldest.
Eldest, of course.
I'm going to make that call because I'm the eldest.
Pressure's on.
Okay. Favorite local band?
Ever?
Ever.
Let's see, that's tough. Yeah, I would maybe go with the Miracle Workers.
Miracle Workers, shout out. Favorite place to eat in Oregon, alive or dead? That means it cannot exist anymore, or it can still exist.
A restaurant? See, I'm too slow at thinking.
Okay, we'll edit it out.
I'm gonna have to pass on that one. There's too many things come to mind.
Okay.
I can't pick a
We can
favorite.
come back to it.
I'm hard to pick.
And describe your political affiliation in 5 words.
Whoa.
I'd say progressive. I'd say maybe left of the Democratic Party.
Left of the Democratic Party. We'll count that. In 5 words or more, maybe.
Yeah, 5 words or more. In 5 to 100 words.
Yeah.
Favorite local band?
So when he paused, I thought I was going to slide in and get the Miracle Workers in, but now he called them. So I think that they're underrated. I think they're amazing.
They just got inducted into the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. So.
Does Everclear count? I like them. Or
Yeah.
Dandy Warhols.
Yeah, both of those count.
Yeah, okay.
Favorite place to eat, alive or dead?
So there's a joke that I could make is that, and you guys know this, was the place that where your mom and I made all of our most important decisions
Right.
for the first 5 or 10 years of our life was. But I think our favorite restaurant is Portland City Grill.
Portland City Grill.
Shout out.
Okay,
Shout
I
out
think
to
I
Big
came
Pink.
up with one.
Okay.
I will say Escape from New York Pizza.
Oh.
There you go.
But see, mine says Portland in the name.
Yeah.
So it's already
But they're
iconic.
escaping
Yeah,
from
they're
New York
escaping.
to go to Portland.
Yeah.
So
I missed the one that used to be downtown. So there you go. That's OG stuff.
I think the one where we had the most memories of was probably Ringside or
Yeah.
Old
Yeah.
Country Kitchen,
Right.
Sailors. But yeah,
Well, I thought you were gonna say Stanwiches.
rest in peace.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's why she said alive or dead.
Yeah.
Because they did.
Yeah. We won't talk about that though. Describe your political affiliation, 5 words or more.
Yes.
Well, there's one.
Conservative. But not before Christian.
Oh, that's catchy.
That could be a bumper sticker.
Trademark that right now.
My idea.
Trademark it.
Okay, and then I guess we sort of talked about this in Legacy. I'm sorry to ask you one more question, but
I know you
I
guys are
think-
already packing up to go.
I know you gotta get
Book
home.
bags are
My
packed.
car's already been stolen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think what would your, since we're talking about legacy and nothing is more eternal than a podcast.
Mm.
What would your message be to future Oregonians who are of course going to listen to this?
Yeah, and speak into the mic and look into the camera when you say it. To direct it to them.
Yeah, I think this is not good enough. We joked a little bit about where we live now, but in where we live in Central Oregon, everybody kind of knows each other. You're kind of held back to that standard of some level of civility. Portland has the opportunity to be that again. And we joked or commented about it when we grew up. The neighborhood kind of took care of everybody, especially the wild kids. But I think Portland could be weird enough where people actually do form stronger communities and neighborhoods. And I think that we've lost a little bit of that. Some of that is politics, some of that is just personalities and other stuff. But I'd really like to see Portland get back to being that community where people are invested in each other. And, when you need something, whether it's financial support or whether it's just a cup of sugar, you've got that resource around your community. It does sort of play sort of a pseudo role like the church used to play, but there's no reason why Portland couldn't become more adoptive of this, help your neighbor. I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that anyone that comes here from somewhere else, get to know the history. A lot of people gave their blood, sweat, and tears to make Portland what it is now, and I'm not saying you have to keep it the way it is. Keep it on track. It's bound to evolve with all the people that come here, but recognize and respect all the people that led up to where we are today, and work to make it better, but still respecting, I guess, the history a little bit. We were talking about that a little bit in our old neighborhood and in Parkrose, but just kind of respecting the history and working to make it better.
Agreed.
We'll do it.
Okay,
We'll do
we're
it.
counting
We'll
on
do
you.
it.
We're counting on you.
Just between the two of us,
Well,
we
we
got
are
it.
your legacy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the fun thing about families, about generations, and unfortunately, you get Addie and I, whether you like it or not.
Awesome.
We are your offspring, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
We are the next of the family line.
Right.
So we are the ones that will carry the torch and hopefully not set anything on fire.
I can't ride a bike, though. But I do take TriMet, so I can't drive either. Doing my part by not learning how to
She's
drive.
not biking nor driving.
She's really
Yeah.
anti-establishment.
Just anti-transportation.
Public transit.
She likes to just stay where she's at.
I mean, walkable cities
Yeah, walkable
would be my
cities.
dream. And with that, we're out.
Thank you guys so much
You
for
bet.
being here and answering all of our questions.
Our pleasure.
This show is brought to you by Woodland Sung Productions, a non-profit media production company based in Portland, Oregon. The show is produced by Caleb Sung, Addison Woodside, and Kaiya Lind. It's edited by Marcy Coy. Special thanks to our Patreon subscribers and our mom and dad.
Beaverheads for life. I just want to shout out my children. I love you guys, and I hope you listen to this after I die and think of me.
My dad said not to laugh so much.